Alrighty, and everyone, I want to welcome you to the Women in Horror panel. My name is Chana Odom. If you are interested in joining a horror-themed book club, I will shamelessly plug we have one in Ashaway, Rhode Island. Come please find me, or you can email the library itself. We would love to have you join us. So as we get started, I just want the panelists here to introduce themselves, and then we'll get into some questions.
Hello, I'm Christa Carmen. I'm the author of The Daughters of Block Island, Beneath the Poet's House, How to Fake a Haunting, and a short story collection. Obviously, I write horror, and I'm very happy to be here and happy to see all of you.
Hello, Victoria Dalpe. I'm also a horror writer. I write short and long horror and dark fantasy and all sorts of stuff. And live in Providence and excited to be here and talk about being a woman in horror.
Hi, my name is Helly. I am the author of Poems for Vampires and Poems for Providence. A very whimsical, weird goth vibes. This is my first panel ever, first convention ever, so I'm really, really honored to be here today. Thanks for being here.
Hi, I'm Ari Mnemonic. I'm an author of Dreams That Rot, Please Hold While I Malfunction, and Whispers from the Crypt. I'm also an artist and an actress. Everything I do is horror-based.
Alrighty, so just on the questions, if you want to answer them, great. If everybody wants to take a stab at it, no problem. If you don't, not everybody has to. So,
No.
But this is one that I think is for all of the panelists here. What female author in the horror space was your biggest influence?
You gonna go first? I mean, I can. I think if we're being totally, I was thinking about this before because I know this was the one we had gotten in advance. I would say Anne Rice. I came to her young. I started reading Anne Rice around 11 or 12, and I think I always appreciated her grasp on prose and the kind of excess with writing, but also genuine horror and genuine disturbing things can be happening while also being kind of beautiful. And I think she would probably be my most fundamental. I don't know who I am today. It would be because I read a lot of Anne Rice when I was younger. This dress even.
Yeah. I will answer the question a teeny bit differently because, I could say there's probably a handful that I feel like influenced me in terms of how I write today or vibes I'm going for or what have you. But what popped into my mind was I guess 12 years ago now when I started to write again, but more with the aim of writing for publishing as opposed to just writing for myself. I didn't really know where to start, and I was like, I think I should probably write a novel. That's what you do if you want to be a writer, right? You write a novel. And I just happened to, I had not read The Lottery by Shirley Jackson. I guess maybe I read it in high school. I don't think I did, because I think if I had read it, I would have remembered it. And I ended up reading that story, and it was literally right when I was like, I'm going to start writing more, to be a writer and start to send my stuff out. And then I read The Lottery and then got in my car and drove to Staples and bought notebooks and pens. And I was like, I'm going to write a short story that's as good as The Lottery. Still working at that. Don't think it's going to happen. And I did the first one out. So I think the most direct influence on my writing, I almost feel like she got me off my butt and writing again. And I wrote predominantly short fiction for a long time because of her.
I definitely remember reading that one in high school. Do you remember reading The Lottery in high school?
Yes. I was going to say Shirley Jackson. She's amazing. She does great, she's almost lyrical and poetic with the way she forms her sentences and her word choice. And if it's not Shirley Jackson, Mary Shelley is a classic. If you don't love the gothic horror, from shorts to poems, she had such a tragic life too, and the way she carried, like Anne Rice, when you suffer a tragedy and you carry that over to your literature, and it's relatable, so it brings you through it.
I was actually going to say Anne Rice, but then I encouraged you to go first.
I was going to say Shirley Jackson, but I knew she was going to say Shirley Jackson, so I was like,
I was like, surely no one will say the vampire author. I think I'm actually going to go with Sarah Helen Whitman. If you're not familiar with her, she was a poet in Providence during Edgar Allan Poe's time and was actually engaged to Edgar Allan Poe. But that did not work out because Poe would not stop drinking and he caused a scene, so she said, we're done. But she regularly conducted seances at her house and was just a really spooky, haunted woman. And I think we would have been great friends. And her poetry is just chef's kiss. So I want the world to know that Sarah Helen Whitman exists and can exist in your heart, too.
So why do you think the female voice is such a crucial part to the horror genre?
Okay, well, just being a woman at points is horrific. From becoming a woman, and just every month is brutal, to childbirth, to the unseen pain, whether it's physical, mental. Men have had, no offense, but they've kind of dominated the space for a long time, whether it's books or film, and it's nice to get some female perspective in there. No one really knows, or until recently, the ways that we suffer kind of quietly, and that rage. And now you have books and film coming out with these heroines that are just, it's amazing. It's inspiring. It makes you feel like you're not crazy, like you're not the only one just like going through this madness. Yeah, I don't know. It's simple, but that's my answer.
And also jumping in with the Mary Shelley thing, also women kind of created a lot of these subgenres. Like the haunted house format was like women's fiction before it was anything else. So, I mean, women have actually been writing and part of horror's history since its inception. So I think, we often kind of get forgotten about it, but I mean, we were pretty much there the whole time and writing stuff the whole time. So we've always been there.
You guys might see some true women in horror today when we all freeze to death on this panel up here. So sorry if I'm literally teeth chattering while I'm answering. So this month, March, is Women in Horror Month. For those of you who do not know about that, do not celebrate. Start. And there's an author that's written a bunch of horror novels that are all really amazing, Rachel Harrison, and she on Instagram started this conversation at the beginning of the month that kind of exploded and blew up, and all people were commenting and talking about it. And I thought it was really interesting because people have talked about this same topic in the past, but she really hit the nail on the head and hit it really eloquently in that women writing horror often will get this sort of oh, that's a really good horror book for a book about women's trauma, or oh, that's a really cool horror protagonist for a female protagonist going through a miscarriage. It's these clarifiers. It's not just I don't want to pick on any one particular male author, but if a male author comes out with a book,
Stephen King is
right? Stephen, I mean, that's too easy though. I just feel even more, not more modern, but Clay McLeod Chapman and Nat Cassidy had huge books this past year, and nobody's ever yeah, that's a good book for a book about a dude going through this. So I think that it's important to continue to have women's voices in horror, just to continue to try to even the playing field, so that a book that's by a woman, about a woman going through something can become just a good horror novel. It doesn't have to be with this kind of caveat, oh, it's good for, part of the conversation that was happening on Instagram, and I'm sure you can even go to Rachel Harrison's Instagram account and go back to the beginning of the month and see this whole conversation. It was super interesting. But, it was she often will get comments from other male horror authors or male fans that are oh, I really liked that, but I didn't really relate to that because it was this woman going through this, and you would never say to the male author that their male protagonist I didn't relate to the male character. It's just, it is what it is, and it's people are consuming the story for the sake of the story, not because they have to relate to it. So
I think women have always been creative. We've always been able to explore thoughts, feelings, emotions that can contribute to horror, because horror is very much a, sit on the edge of your seat thinking about like what people are feeling, what they're going through. And I think, this is a great time to be a woman writing horror, because, people are encouraged to explore their creativity. Whereas before, like years and years and years ago, when women wanted to write anything, they had to pretend to be a man to succeed. So like, that sucked. So I think it really is important for women to continue exploring the genre of horror. And I really like, what people are doing right now. It's so cool. Like seeing all of your stuff is like, wow, that's dope. Sometimes I forget I'm a woman. So this panel is good. But yeah, I think it is really important for women to continue writing horror, and because like I guess I would say historically too, like women who did start writing horror was like the cozy mysteries. It wasn't like high stakes anything, but now we're seeing that, and I would like to continue to see that.
So if we never had Mary Shelley, Shirley Jackson, Anne Rice, for example, do you think women would still have such a strong place within the horror genre that they do today?
Yeah, because that's only like 3 out of many. And I think as creators, but also as consumers, because I think all of the history of horror, it's been about 50%. It's always been women in the movie theaters, buying books, things like that. There's a misunderstanding of the market of like who is consuming this and how they're, and I think also who's creating it, because again, women have been writing under man's names and are under, pseudonyms, and, that they've just always been part of the conversation. They might not be getting as many spots at the table, but there's always been a few women just in the mix kind of from the get-go. So I think, we've always been there. We just maybe aren't getting as much coverage. And there's also, I think, an idea that we don't go as hard, or like, for a certain type of reader, that they find the prose to be too flowery. There's like a lot of misconceptions about what women write and how they write. And I mean, like even my father's one is like, oh, well, I don't really like women writers. They're a little wordy, like that idea of, that's just in my. Ironically, he's the one who gave me Anne Rice, because that's like the one woman writer he likes to read, and go figure then. But I mean that idea that that for a certain type of reader that women wouldn't go there, and I just don't think that's necessarily true. I think just sometimes the stylistic approaches are different, and like I often on panels like this when I'm trying to think of what the difference is, and I feel like a lot of narratives, and obviously I'm speaking in massive generalizations here, but look, I feel like a lot of traditional kind of male horror narratives, it's like something coming into your house, like, or a threat that's coming into your world or into your family or whatever. And I feel like a lot of women's horror, the threat is in the house already, and it's something that's in the house. So it's either because it's someone who's in the family, or it's like a mental, like if you think of like the Shirley Jackson, like house on Haunted Hill, like the idea that it's actually like an unreliable narrator, or that the ghosts, like it might be madness, like that idea that you can't trust your own reality is so much a part of. So I think the narratives often are more internal, and the horror is often more physical or internal than external threat, would be, I think, one of the bigger tonal shifts in how they write about it. Again, massive generalization. You could probably find a million opposite ones, but
I'm going to add to that. I don't think it's just the tonal shifts, because at points, if you've read like The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo series, The Girl Who Kicked a Hornet's Nest, it's a male that wrote that. Great. It's a great series, but women can write something similar and they're not going to get the same reception or feedback, even for that brutality, which I always find interesting. Like they just kind of fall to the way, like you're saying, like we just need more women kicking down the doors to be like, no, we're doing this stuff too. Sometimes it's flowers and metaphorical, but sometimes it's really brutal and horrific, like stuff that might traumatize you just reading it. So I think we just need more of that, like just the equality there, like why it's not the same. That's all.
I would say like if Mary Shelley and Anne Rice hadn't stepped up to the plate, I really do think that another woman would have. because, you know, we're brave, you know, if we want something, we're going to get it. And, you know, somebody had to be first, and it just so happened to be, you know, people like them. I will say for my like own personal thing, it was Anne Rice that encouraged me to take writing seriously, because at one point, like at the end of her life, she was really active on Facebook groups. And I wrote into the Facebook group and I said, hey, I'm writing a vampire novel. And she wrote back and she was like, please keep writing. And that like really stuck with me. So I feel like if it weren't for Anne Rice at that period of time that I was in, that I don't know if I would be writing today. So, yeah.
So you've mentioned it a couple of times. So have you ever thought you would use a pen name to hide the fact that you're a female author in the horror genre?
No, just because I think I saw from the very beginning that even if women weren't necessarily getting as much recognition or getting the same type of recognition, I still liked what they were doing, and I wanted to align myself with that.
I don't, even if I was like Victor Dalpe, I think they'd be like, I think this is a woman. Like, I think just my interest in the way I write about things, I feel like I
Get outed pretty fast.
Yeah, I don't think they would think this is a man. So it probably wouldn't have worked for me anyway.
Yeah, there's no way I could get away with that. But the answer is no. Just hell no. I don't know. Like, I guess to me it's like, I don't feel like I would get ahead anymore if I made, you know, if I had a man's name versus if I just took my own name. Like, I feel, you know, confident in what I can do and what the skills I'm growing. And I want the world to see that progress and that journey of where I started and where I end up. So I don't want, you know, to die one day and everybody to be like, oh, wow, look at Hector over here. No, I want them to be like, that was Helly, and she started here, and hopefully she gets up there. So, yeah, I'm going to be myself.
I've thought about doing it just to make a comparison. I know authors do it, and they'll even stay within their same sex. They won't change their gender, but they're curious to see, will someone buy a book from this name that they might not know? So I've thought about doing a male name just to see for a different genre, just for comparison. But not as like I want to hide the fact that I'm a woman. Just genuine curiosity, that's all.
I also just feel like that tactic doesn't work today like it did back in the 70s or the 1800s, but also even like the 70s, because social media and like you can't, you know, we're all out here doing this, and this wasn't as big of a thing where, you know, maybe if you're a huge author with like a, you know, huge publisher and they already have a really established line of books with you under one name and you want to go out and, you know, write
Richard Bachman thing.
or even, I mean, I know it's super controversial figure, but like J.K. Rowling came out and, I mean, the publishers were going to give her massive amounts of marketing anyway, and she did that other thriller series that was like under the male pseudonym. And then you're getting like people, you know, the demographic of people in the bookstores that are maybe going to pick that up, they're not probably even the types of people that are engaging with readers on a face-to-face basis anyway. They're just literally seeing the male name and like grabbing it.
Also, like I came up during the high point of the splatterpunk fiction era and read a ton of splatterpunk like as it was coming out, and there were a lot of women within that group. And I'm thinking like the Kathy Kojas, and now I know like Poppy Z. Bright, you know, has transitioned, but was considered at that point like a queen of horror and things. And so there were quite a few women writers that were coming up at that time, so that were writing really extreme stuff, and also were making good careers as horror writers. So I don't think I felt like it was a man's game. Like even as a teen reader, like I'm just thinking like even like Tananarive Due and Melanie Tam, and I'm trying to think Yvonne Navarro. Like there was a lot of women writing horror of all different stripes doing well as I was coming up. So it never felt like, oh, this is like you have to be a man to be doing this. Like I always felt like there were plenty of women, and I was reading plenty of women as I was growing up. So.
How have you seen the horror community change with more female voices writing in the genre now?
From what I've seen, and I kind of contribute this to like social media with like Book Talk and Instagram. I feel the change kind of happened around that time. And the shift I've seen is more character development. Like the plots are better, the character development is better. It's not just your basic, sorry, Dean Koontz, I hate to like put you under the bus, but like the basic plot. Like we're seeing more of well thought out characters with well thought out intentions. And when I look at whose name is attached to those books, it's usually a woman's, because they're getting out there, they're writing characters like that. So that's kind of where I saw the transition was when Book Talk happened, and people were encouraged to not keep those ideas to themselves and not feel ashamed about exploring more taboo things, even. And so that's what I've been seeing.
I'm thinking, so like when I was a teenager, I guess I went to the bookstore, but for some reason I just remember, I feel like my parents had a lot of books and mass market paperbacks that they would just they just would always end up in my room. And I feel like it was Stephen King, Dean Koontz, even like, gag me now saying this today, but like James Patterson, like early stuff was like kind of, Kiss the Girl. There was some like horror adjacent, like thriller stuff. And it was all these, I always just seemed to have an unending supply of books as a teenager, but that were all male authors. And I never really thought about it then. And just the simple fact that there's just so much more on the shelves to choose from. I don't know. I was going to go off on another tangent, but you guys have to speak too, so that's enough.
It seems like the projection for women is written much differently, like you were saying. Even like when it comes to spicy books, when men write them, it's like a child sort of, like describing us and how we look and all the things, and I'm like, oh my gosh. But women have really kicked up the game. It's legible. I'm like, oh, I want to keep reading this and what's happening now. It's not just guttural and bare, and you'll find that in some of the LGBTQ books too, like versus just, the straight male authors cannot write about females in a productive and it's gore for gore's sake, except it's adult stuff for adult sake, and it's not engaging, but women have really changed that. And like you're saying, they've been more descriptive. The way they can write is just, it's changing everything.
I think the one commonality is often that it's like a woman writer, but what they can write becomes much broader. So if you even look at like the mainstream like horror books that have come out, there's a lot of like folk horror coming out and a lot of kind of feminist-y stuff and a lot of sapphic stuff. And so like just the umbrella is woman writer, but like the type of fiction is all over the place. And I think that's kind of an exciting part, that there is like, or even, I hate the term and it's super derogatory to me at least, but that like the pink horror stuff, which just feels like, It's the same with like women getting branded as cozy horror. If it's not like full chainsaw.
Or if it's not like a monster in it.
Yeah, like they're like, oh, it's cozy. And it's like, are you saying that because it's a woman? Can you find me some cozy man authors? Because I haven't found a lot of cozy male horror authors. So it feels coded to me. James Patterson, right? Like, oh, he writes cozy, right? Stephen King's cozy, right? Small town, little kid, main protagonist. Feels kind of cozy. Dogs, yeah. So, I think that, like a lot of these things end up getting coded as like women's fiction, which I don't love because the classification isn't a flattering one usually. But I do think the freedom within the genre is actually quite broad for women and like what they're bringing. And even when I'm seeing like what agents are looking for like picking up, and they're like with women's horror, and the list is long, and like what they want is kind of whatever anybody wants to write, as long as it's like from a feminine
perspective in some way. And that, I think, is actually kind of exciting. And they're like, yeah, monsters, weird monster sex, weird whatever, haunted houses, folk stuff, cult stuff, who cares? Like, I kind of like that there's like an appetite for it right now, which is kind of fun.
With the state of the world as it is right now, how do you feel the horror genre is a great place to express the feelings and fears of what is happening to women?
I mean, that question, yes. That question could go for any horror writer. But yeah, women in particular. That's a tough question because there's so many different like buckets and directions I could go in with it. But I will just say personally, I have never, have never felt like there's more. Sorry guys, I flew at like 2 a.m. yesterday. My brain is still like stuttering. I'm off on mild tangents here. Let me start again. Let's put it this way. I have an idea notebook. That's how I keep my thoughts organized when I'm like between projects. The idea notebook that I've kept for the past 12 years was it was a big notebook, right? So it wasn't all the way filled up for like most of those 12 years. And I feel like in the last like 2 years, it's just every news article, every like thing that happens, every conversation with, like or not like-minded people. It's just the ideas. I feel like I could write off of the ideas that the news and the state of the world has generated in the last year or two for the next 200 years.
Well, there's this whole moving trend of like the feminine rage issues, and everyone's like really mad, and like we are witnessing in our lifetime an erosion of our actual rights, and just the like even the like raise of like the dangers of giving birth or having to give birth even if you don't want to, or being able to vote, or like there's like this real like we are feeling the push, like there are active campaigns to strip our rights as like an equal part of society, and it's really wild because I just never thought that would happen. Like I'm like kind of surprised still, like oh, okay, I guess you guys like legitimately don't want us to vote anymore, or like it's just really weird to me. So I think there is a lot of rage at feeling like being half the population and feeling not as valuable and in society, and not getting the same opportunities, getting consistently paid less, getting consistently kind of pushed to the side a little bit. And that it's hard not to be mad about that, especially as you're starting to see, especially like the most vulnerable of us, genuinely suffering and literally dying because of this. It's hard not to be pretty mad, I guess, just over and over again, every day.
I guess kind of like writing is a way to get all of your, your thoughts out there, like what's in your heart, what's in your mind, and what kind of message you want to leave with other people. Because you can have a conversation with people, you can protest for your rights, you can stand up, and you should. If your rights are being threatened, you should, fight for those. But I think with books, those things are, well-refined ideas that you sat and you poured your heart and soul into. And so those, leave a lasting impact. And, if somebody wants to destroy that book, I'm going to write it again. You're going to write it again. And, yeah.
I'm in my late 30s, and I feel like I've been paying attention to the news ever since I was a kid, and it's all been happening. I remember this back when Bush Jr. was the president. So I feel like my entire life has been nothing but madness, and it's not even so much the people in charge that scare me, but it's everyone around me. Like I saw what happened back in 2020 where neighbors were trying to eat each other alive. So whatever old white man was making rules didn't really bother me, but my neighbor was the one, or someone more personal. So that's what I'm taking the inspiration from, and that's what scares me the most is the average person, how quickly they turn into monsters when they feel they're justified, or they have the science to back them, or the laws to back. That's the scariness. We can always change laws, we can always get people out of power, but it's the majority thought, the herd mentality that really has me on edge, and that's where I get all my motivation from, and all the fear, and all the, oh my gosh, what's gonna happen in the future? It's how are we as a people gonna move forward, and how are we gonna do better, and hopefully not destroy each other.
What is one piece of advice you have for any and all women that are wanting to become a writer or an author?
I would just say don't write exactly the book that you want to write. Don't let anything that's on a bookstore shelf or anything that is, I mean, even if there are some people that will tell you, like, you know, like you mentioned agents and what they're looking for. I mean, you can go on every literary agency website and look at every agent accepting new clients and look at what they're looking for, and you can look at market trends, and you can look at things like, you know, the horror authors that are successful and the types of things they're writing. And it's, first of all, by the time you write what you think they're going to want, it's going to have all shifted, number one. Number two, we're, like I talked about earlier, we're already seeing that if a woman writes something that's personal to her experience or to the female experience, it probably is going to be categorized that way anyway. So just don't care about that and just write exactly what you want to write. 'Cause, I mean, for me, I don't even know how you could not do that. I mean, I've been with the same publisher for 3 books, and they just are like the last book that I tried to have them take a look at and see if they wanted to publish it. It was a little bit of that, like, well, you know, this is maybe a little bit too niche and a little bit too this and a little bit, and I was just like, I'm not gonna not write exactly what I want to write, because at the end of the day, the joy is in the creation, and I think women in particular should remember not to be skewed by, you know, what others are kind of telling them to do in order to be successful.
Yeah, and I think the advice for anyone, women, man, whoever, to be, you know, just to write. Like, if you want to write, you got to actually write. And you want to finish it, you got to finish it. And you got to send it out. And you got to deal with the rejection of that. And you've got to put yourself out there and get, you know, and force your way in. And, you know, again, we're often on a lot of the same book circuits and things. And we're on these women panels, and I'm the only woman. And it's like, well, as the woman, and I have to like answer like as a woman in the thing all the time. So I've gotten it like I do it so often. It's like, well, as the woman here, my people's answer would be like, you know, that weirdness of functioning when you often are in spaces that are majority male, and then you are kind of functioning like as an emissary for the community, and you're like, oh, this is a lot of responsibility in general. But so I think that the writing advice should actually in some ways be the same for women and men in this, especially in this time period, because I think there's a good chance that you will be able to do okay, like as a woman, like, you know, and so I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want you to feel like you even have to be beholden to be writing as a woman, like, you know, just to be a writer and to write what you want to write, how you want to write it, however you want to write it, and to not let it define you unless that's actually narratively what you want to be writing about. But I guess that would be my advice, but more with anyone who wants to be a writer is like, you got to write. Just write all the time, edit all the time, keep working. Like, that's how you become a writer, is actually writing. So that's first step, I guess.
And I agree with that. I think, like, no matter what your gender is, like, if you want to write, you should write. I guess a big thing for me is when you're sitting down and writing, don't write like you're ashamed, like you're like, oh, I can't write this because my family might see it, or oh, I can't write this spicy scene because my friends might see it, and they might think that's kind of weird, and that's kind of a weird, you know, you don't want your parents seeing your horror novel.
That is a good time to use a pseudonym, though, like especially if you're an educator or your stuff is really weird and you're like, I don't love my dad reading this story, like then then an author.
But yeah, when you're in your first drafts, write like nobody you know is going to see it, because that is the most, like, you're holding yourself back if you're scared of what people are going to think of you, no matter what kind of scenes you're writing. And then the other piece of advice I have is, please don't go on Reddit and write out a paragraph of your book and be like, rate my book from 1 to 10, because they will tear you apart every time. People on Reddit are mean. Do not go there.
Yeah, if you need a place to start posting, make your own blog. There are plenty of websites you can make for free and have blogs. You can start putting your poetry, or if your blog, short stories, any of that, and you can start getting feelers that way. And unlike the Reddit community, you can share on your social media pages or join like Facebook groups for authors specifically. There's one for just women. There's all sorts of stuff. Go like that route, but just do the thing. Like, no one else is going to do it. Do it. Believe in yourself. Some of your biggest haters might be the people that know you personally. They might not be the loudest cheering in your corner. I found that strangers have been my biggest supporters, other than like my sister. So don't get discouraged, even if your family is not like, yeah, like sometimes they aren't the biggest supporters, but just do it anyway and enjoy it.
So what was it overall about the horror genre that drew you to it the most, that's where you wanted to write?
I
love you. Didn't have to always answer first.
I know.
She handed you the mic, but you don't have to.
I will just say it's an easy answer. I've answered this. I've been writing for a long time. People ask this. People are interested in what draws people to horror. I just always was. I always wanted the Bunnicula books, the Goosebumps books, so my parents kept all of me and my sister's books from when we were kids, and I noticed that even the Boxcar Children's and the Nancy Drews, a lot of those were kind of spooky, but even just the sort of regular series, the ones that I had kept were always the spooky ones, like the Boxcar Children find a ghost, and so I just always loved it, and I think the simplest, most straightforward answer is that I find non-horror stories to sometimes just be a little boring. It's just more exciting. I don't watch anything but horror movies just because I think they're exciting, and it's just my taste.
Well, I'm always waiting for something bad to happen in even Heated Rivalry, I'm like, do you think they're going to die in this last episode? They're like, no, I think they're going to get together. And you're like, oh, I mean, spoilers, right? But I was like, wait, it feels danger. I think they're going to get murdered in this cottage. You're like, you don't watch a lot of romance. Like, no, I don't know. Do people live at the end of these stories? Yes. Since I was tiny, it was that very yeah, but what happens? Is there blood in this one? What is it? What happened? I was obsessed with the video stores, and you go into the horror section and, messing around in cemeteries and, just liking creepy stuff, and have always just trended toward the darker side of things, just in general, because it's always there. I also grew up on a farm, and, no stars. I mean, so much work. But I mean, you experience life cycles. Everyone always thinks of the more pastoral parts. You're like, yeah, and then you watch a mom sheep roll over on her babies, and then they're dead, and you're like, ooh, and just or you take care of something and it dies, or you eat it. You name it. We used to always name our calves and paint signs for them, and then they would literally be slaughtered and cut in half with the chainsaw in my backyard, in the fall, for Halloween, or whatever. So, and so you're just really part of life cycles, and just how harsh nature is too, and just how harsh life is in general. And there's so much beauty and there's also so much kind of horror and tragedy they're happening always, and there's a balance to that. And I think I've always kind of leaned in that way, where I both love the beautiful grotesque has been a name of a couple art shows and things I've done things, and I really like that dichotomy of just life and death, or the beauty of a bouquet of flowers, but then also how it stinks because it's actually a rotting thing in there, and just so I mean that's my thing, I guess.
Kind of sort of to piggyback off that, there's a saying that says, write what you know. And I have known many horrors and many miseries. And it used to be that I would just write horror. And it was like the most, dark, depressing stuff ever. And then, as I got out of, bad situations, I started writing more of a balance of things. And yeah, what was the question again? I forget.
Like where you went, where you drawn from, yeah. What? Like when you got into horror? Why?
Yeah, so I was pretty young when I started getting into horror, and it was because of that. It was like an outlet for me to be able to tell my story in a fictional sense without feeling, shamed by telling the truth. I can just write it in a story and nobody will know. But yeah, and then I guess over time, I sort of found the balance between like only dark horror and then, exploring other genres within that as well, like all that kinds of stuff. And I always liked monsters. I always thought those were cool, like the Twilight Zones and vampires. I've always loved vampires. It was because I wanted to be all of those things.
And you did.
Yeah, and here I am wearing fangs and writing about. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into it, and now I am finding that balance. And for the record, I do love Heated Rivalry. I'm repping my Heated Rivalry pin.
In everything.
Yeah, that's kind of my story behind it.
So my granny and papa had a vast collection of film and books, horror specifically, so I grew up on it. But it was also cathartic. I was my whole life in a bunch of physical pain. I finally got diagnosed with ovarian cancer in my late 20s. So it's only been 10 years of me living a pain-free life. My entire life has been pain and being gaslit and being, so between the medical stuff, the mental stuff, the physical, that's all I knew. So I found horror so cathartic, and I didn't even have a reason why other than knowing I was really messed up, both physically and mentally. And just being able to relate to it. And I'll even watch other shows that aren't horror, like Shameless. I find that show cathartic as well. And people are like, how do you watch this? It's like, it makes me feel so much better knowing I'm not alone. So between just the nudge of my family being such fans of it, and then just, yeah, truly finding therapy and solace in it, it's been so helpful.
All right, and we just have a couple moments left before we wrap up. So just ask the panel here, what is one book written by a female horror author do you feel is required reading?
I would love to answer this. Okay. I'm so excited. The Vampire Lestat by Anne Rice. Interview with the Vampire is so great, but The Vampire Lestat that is what got me into really, really exploring writing on a serious level, because the way that she writes characters, like their emotions, women writing men, chef's kiss. And I think that should be required reading. The plot is good. You get to see Lestat's point of view rather than Louis'. And he is just a sad vampire boy. And I love it, and everyone should read it. And if they don't, you should be ashamed of yourself.
So I'm going to throw a really random one out there. Louisa May Alcott, if you read Lost in a Pyramid or The Mummy's Curse, that's really, really great. Shirley Jackson, The Haunting of Hill House, that's phenomenal as well. Both of those, you cannot go wrong with them.
I was thinking about this. I'm going to go a little bit more contemporary, just to mix, but not that much more. But I actually think Kelly Link's Magic for Beginners is a short story collection. And I really like her stuff because she is impossible to define. And like, she's in every genre. Like, her stories, even within the same story, you're like, I don't know what this is. And yet she gets to some genuinely disturbing places and like leaves. I think a lot of times you see, especially like on books of horror and stuff, and people are always asking, I feel like every single day, someone's like, I need a book that's really scary. Like, I want to scream and throw a book. Like, find me a book, I'm never going to sleep again. And I'm always like, yeah, the problem with horror writing versus film. Like, we're a visual animal. So if, like, you watch a movie that's scary, you're getting sound, you're getting things are jumping at you, you're responding like you're walking through a haunted house. With reading, I did bring a painting for you. With reading, you're having to find the words, translate the words, and add a picture to it. You're putting yourself through it. So you have a few blocks there, like you're going through something in a different way. So the way you're experiencing horror is different. Like, you're not gonna scream and throw a book. Like, it's like, and then he was there, and then you're just like, throw it. Like, that's not how you would experience that, because you're telling yourself the story. So I feel like the most effective horror for me is horror that brings a certain type of dread or haunting that like bothers you and then just kind of lingers long after. It's like a feeling, almost like just like leaves a slime on you or something, like you're bothered by it. And I find a lot of her stories, specifically The Magician's Hat, I think is the name of it, or Sorcerer's Hat, is like a genuinely disturbing story that just sticks to you. And also she just breaks all the rules while she's writing the rules. Like, and I just think she's such a unique storyteller, and just worth looking at her fiction in general. But that collection in particular, and it won like every award the year it came out and stuff. It's just fantastic. So that was one I would say.
So if it has to be just required reading, I'm thinking of this question more of like required reading for somebody who wants to be a horror writer, not like school required reading. So I'm also going to go more contemporary because I don't tend to ever read or watch something more than once. If I've read it, if I've watched it and I've experienced it, I'm just sort of like, been there, done that, I'll move on. Sarah Gran's Come Closer. I don't know if it's Gran or Gran. Her last name's Gran. It's Sarah Gran. It's the novel. It's Come Closer. It's very short, and I have never read something that like. When you start reading it, it really does feel like you've gotten on some sort of slide that you then cannot get off of. And it's just an absolute masterclass in like growing tension, dread, like this just downward descent that you cannot stop. That what's going on in this story cannot be stopped, and you cannot stop reading it. And I actually just reread it, which was strange for me in and of itself. I was like, I want to read that again because it's inspiring, and I want to like try to do something similar where like it just feels so inevitable, but you're just along for every step of the ride with this just growing dread that you really can't put your finger on. And then I found that even like knowing what happens, the exact same thing happened. Like you just can't look away and you can't stop. So I highly recommend it. It's very, very good.
Well, I want to thank all of our amazing authors for joining me up here today, and to please check them out and the other women's voices that are in the horror community.